So please use the QR code to interact with us because we are about to get started. Welcome, everyone. We are absolutely thrilled to have the webinar series kick off today called Eliminating Payroll and Timesheet Headaches, webinar series proudly brought to you by Digital Learning Partners and WalkMe Together. My name is Veronica Riley. I am the Learning Director here at Digital Learning Partners and your host for today. We have an action-packed session for you today where we are going to deep dive into the challenges of payroll and timesheet issues, in particularly 3 focuses. One is on ongoing compliance demands. The next is inefficient processes. And of course, my favourite, which is the challenge of training our teams on complex payroll and HR systems. Today's session, we will share some insights from our expert panel on how Digital Learning Partners, together with WalkMe, are jointly solving these challenges for our clients. So let me introduce you to this awesome panel. The first is Karen Sapkaya. She is the CEO of Digital Learning Partners and also a former COO and CFO working in both the HR and payroll functions. So she knows these challenges firsthand, and she's worked across FMCG, supply chain, health, and professional services. Next, we have Benjamin Weldon. He is the Country Manager for Australia and New Zealand at WalkMe. He will share with you the paradox of organisations investing in technology but not realising its full value, and we call that the digital adoption gap. He will also share how WalkMe acts as the skin that sits over the top of applications to guide users through their workflow when they need it and how they need it most. Next, we will have a WalkMe demonstration by the one and only David Perigov. He will show you exactly how that skin sits over the top of Kronos. Now, if anybody has ever used that system before, you would know it is not simple. And so you will see in action how WalkMe guides a user through the workflow to be able to successfully complete their timesheet and payroll processes. Then we will have a Q&A session, and our chat is monitored by the lovely Natalia Weinberg, who is our Regional Alliances Manager at WalkMe. So please pop them in there if you have a burning question. Otherwise, we'll certainly have time for a Q&A at the very end where we'll address them all together. Lastly, we will invite you to sync with us at the end so that we can learn a little bit more about your own challenges and how Digital Learning Partners and WalkMe can jointly solve those pain points. So let's get started. Please let me know, where are you from? Where are you dialing in from? So where are you joining us from? What city and what country potentially? I know we had some interesting registrations. It's a good mix across our fair states and territories. Anyone outside of Australia? No. Wonderful. We'll share this with those who did register outside of Australia, so that's all fine. Okay, next question for you. Please tell me, what is your role? Very good mix here. Wonderful. It's great to have change, lead, and even operations teams here so that they can appreciate and understand what the HR and payroll functions really do are challenged by. So that's wonderful to have you here. Next along is, how familiar are you with the Australian legislation titled Closing the Loopholes, which is due to come into effect in January 2025? I like those honest answers. That's handy. I feel like we planned this. Awesome. Karen will discuss this legislation in a bit more detail, so don't worry if you're not familiar with it. And lastly, what are your biggest pain points when you are managing timesheet and payroll, either as a user, as a change lead, or even as a finance or HR manager processing?
Oops. Mhm.
I feel there's a theme of unclear processes and complex systems so far. Yes, and of course, if there's shift work, alternate hours, different countries, different awards, it does become complex. Thank you for sharing. And interestingly, our expert panel do share the same pain points, and that's why we are here today, which is wonderful. So let me kick off by handing over to the wonderful Karen Sapkaya to kick off our session.
Thanks, Veronica. Hi, everybody. I'm Karen Sapkaya. With my background as a CFO and Chief Operating Officer, I understand the critical importance of ongoing compliance, inefficient processes, and training teams in using complex systems. With the upcoming Closing the Loopholes legislation, effective in January 2025, ensuring timesheet and payroll accuracy is becoming increasingly critical. This legislation introduces severe penalties for wage underpayments and up to 10 years imprisonment for individuals involved in intentional underpayments. Getting payroll right is increasingly important now. Today, I want to discuss the specific challenges many organisations face with timesheet errors and payroll accuracy. Now let's talk about key challenges. First challenge being rostering and timesheet errors. Mistakes in data entry, incorrect rostering, non-conforming timesheets can lead to payroll discrepancies and resulting in costly back payments and compliance issues. And I saw that some of you had some of those pain points listed before. These errors can also strain resources and have significant financial impacts. Let me share with you a common use case. Imagine a manager responsible for overseeing the rostering and timesheet entries of their team within a timesheet system like Kronos. They need to ensure that each timesheet entry is accurate and compliant with Fair Work regulations, particularly regarding overtime breaks and specific pay conditions like shift allowances on a public holiday to ensure payroll is processed accurately. Let me ask you some questions to consider that we often find our clients asking. Can I use my existing timesheet platform to meet this new regulation? Where will my users go when they need help in doing this process? And are the platforms we have now suitable for the new changing requirements? Great. Now let me share with you another common use case. WalkMe identifies a new shift worker and ensures they complete the timesheet process correctly to avoid costly errors. It helps them understand how to read and view their roster, access policies and resources, and review their shifts accurately. The questions that we get from our clients include, have I made my software platforms easy to use and navigate for users? Can users easily access the relevant resources and policies to assist them? Maybe there's some of the questions that you're already asking. You can react and give a thumbs up if you like. Another major challenge is processing accurate payments efficiently. Rostering and timesheet errors often result in manual payroll processes for back payments and adjustments, which are time-consuming and costly, and they lead to costly back payments and risk of penalties. These errors don't just impact inaccurate payroll payments, but also inefficient processes. Now, let me share with you another common use case that we experience. A manager generates a report to review the team roster, aiming to optimize rostering shifts and maximize operational efficiencies. WalkMe supports this process by embedding best practice resources directly within the software application. These are the questions that we get from our clients. How do we ensure the accuracy and integrity of the data that users enter into the system? How will our team action manual processes and adjustments? What is the impact on the additional amount of time for us to be compliant with this new legislation? You probably experience some of these questions currently in your processes. Well, now let's hear from Ben Weldon from WalkMe on how these common challenges faced by organisations in ensuring ongoing compliance.
You're on mute, Ben.
You're on
I'm on
mute,
mute.
Ben.
Apologies. As Veronica mentioned earlier around the gap, the digital adoption gap, and as Karen has kindly run us through and posed a number of really interesting and important questions for all of us in this region, in Australia and New Zealand, in payroll and timesheeting, the rate of technology capability and investment in these platforms, in these areas, and I'm sure you would probably agree somewhat, has certainly overtaken the business value that we're seeing out of those platforms. We haven't put humans at the center of this change to match that rate of technology capability and investment. And we refer to this as the digital adoption gap. And it's something that analysts such as IDC, Gartner, and Forrester also agree with us in terms of the significant portion of the difficulty that most organizations are having in closing that digital adoption gap, which is this paradox that we've got more powerful technology more than ever, yet we're unable to deliver on the promise of transformation that comes with both payroll and timesheeting, critically important requirements that our business give us to deliver on. That digital adoption gap is, of course, causing a lot more overwhelm and complexity for our employees than is required. So whether it's a process on an employee onboarding, leave of absence, a change of job, or in fact, timesheeting, employees are being introduced to more and more platforms across many different functions. And that's driving a lot more complexity in their everyday working environment, but also their well-being and their engagement. That's creating friction. It's driving a lack of adoption of these processes. It's creating incomplete processes and data integrity issues in payroll and timesheeting. And of course, with changing regulation, us in these teams are being sort of between a rock and a hard place, between a changing regulation and obligation on our organisation, and the fact that we need our employees to drive adoption and be empowered and engaged in the systems and processes we provide them to ensure that we meet all of our compliance obligations. And of course, the consequences, create a lot of difficulty for us in running these platforms and these business functional areas, but also the users that we need to empower and interact with on a daily basis. So productivity, people are getting stuck in the processes they need to do and asking the person next to them or picking up the phone to help desk or service desk, creating a lot more cost and putting pressure on existing teams that are very lean. Of course, with changing regulation comes changing compliance posture and risk appetite, which is, for many organizations justifying the need and investment in not just digital adoption, but maybe upgrades to existing processes and platforms. And those platforms that we've invested in, we're not getting the right amount of value out of them to drive the change that we need. And of course, because we're waiting complex and lengthy cycles to get little changes done in the backlog of our technology teams, we're missing the opportunity to be more agile to not just these changing regulations, but how we want to evolve the way processes are enacted within our organization. And so WalkMe is designed to really help and support an organization with a lot of these changes, not just in getting better insights in that UAT, the pre-go live, or if you're in fact got an existing platform and you're rolling out a change, how do we understand our users in this period of time prior to go live interacting with the system? How are we supporting the employee onboarding process instead of classrooms and perhaps user guides that are on a central intranet or repository? Nothing's there to really, at a just-in-time point of view, guide users in the flow of work. How are we updating people on new processes or new regulatory changes in the application or the process itself when they need to be educated about where something has changed and how it's changed and how it's going to make, we're going to make it easier for them, not more complex and add more overwhelm to their everyday working environment. And of course, ultimately, the Nevada State of Process Optimization, looking for small improvements or meaningful material improvements every year to drive efficiency and effectiveness of the way we're doing payroll and timesheeting. So as Veronica alluded to earlier, we're a skin that sits on top of an application. We behave and look as very similar behavior to the application we sit on. We support a number of different business units, including payroll, timesheeting in HR, IT, finance, supply chain, and sales. We work across many different ways at which the applications are delivered, and we're providing those insights of how users are engaging and adopting these technology platforms, these workflows, either existing or new. We're then driving specific actions in the flow of work, guiding users to do the things that they need to do in and out, or do it correctly. So there's speed and then accuracy are two core tenets of where WalkMe is. Our mission is to help organizations solve a lot of these particular challenges. And we work across any application that is accessible over a browser. And that's ultimately driving a lot of great return, not just in operational efficiency, but also employee engagement and adoption of these technology platforms that we've invested so much in successfully driving the change we want to see across these organizations. So with that, I will stop sharing and pass over to David, who's going to walk us through the demonstration. So over to you, David.
Wonderful, thank you. Just want to confirm you can see my screen coming through okay? Yes, wonderful. I can see some yeses there. Brilliant. So I'm going to give you a very quick demonstration of WalkMe on Kronos and how we can help people go through, navigate some of that complexity that we've been discussing just before. So in this particular demo, what we're going to go through and see is initially, somebody looking at a fairly flexible but powerful screen. One of the things we want to do is to show people some of the best practices for the work that they need to do, particularly as it relates to rostering. So here, WalkMe is rendered on top of the application in our browser, and then it contains a whole range of, whether it's job aids, links to existing policies, procedures. It contains a range of content, and you can change all of that. You can change it and help people get access to content. Now, importantly, WalkMe gets people to help complete a task rather than to help learn a system. And that's really important when we're trying to go through and complete certain processes. Like, for example, in this case, we want to go through, generate a report that includes public holidays, because as you can appreciate, rostering and shift work on public holidays attracts a different award rate or a different pay rate. And so that's really important for us to be able to get that right. WalkMe takes us directly to the part of the application where we activate that kind of activity. Now, we're working in one location, we're working in Bendigo, but one of the things that we can do here is we can create business rules that adjust to the local locations wherever they are. So now looking at Geelong, you can see the business rules are different, the instructions are different, but also importantly, we've discovered there's a public holiday and we all love public holidays. And one of the things here is that we need to roster people appropriately because that has a significant impact if it's done incorrectly. And so as Karen mentioned earlier, there is some significant consequences of paying people incorrectly. And this is one of the ways, this is one of the moments where these mistakes can happen. So if we're adding a pay code to a person's shift, we might be going in, they're on call, we'll add that pay code. But if it's the wrong one, WalkMe can alert the user in the flow of work that they've picked the incorrect pay code to make sure that they go in and change it to the right one. Or more significantly, if we're reassigning a shift and we need somebody to do a different shift, we can get them to review some of the best practices of reassigning a shift. But if that particular work requires a job transfer or a labor transfer, what that means for the person is as they go in and do that particular transfer, if they haven't selected the appropriate pay rate or the labor level, then WalkMe can alert them to say, hey, not only does this shift change require the time adjustment or the payroll adjustment, you also need to adjust the labor level. And to help the person complete that task, WalkMe will then highlight, so you can see those orange callouts. WalkMe will highlight to them that they need to do something to make sure that in the flow of work they are compliant with not only legislation, but also your internal policies. And so as part of that, WalkMe can also help individuals, as they get into the application. You have new starters, you have new people that may need to go and do some activities. So you can give them an onboarding experience without having to spend a lot of time or effort in trying to get them onboarded. In the flow of work, they get shown how to use the application, how to use the activities that are important to their role. So that means you can show different onboarding experiences to different user groups in your organizations. And importantly, when people want help, they don't necessarily want help using a system. They want help to complete their task. And so WalkMe helps them get through the process to make sure they do it in a compliant way. They manage the complexity of our modern work environment, and they're able to release capacity in their day. And when you look at that at scale, all of your employees being able to release capacity and get to the kind of process that they need to get to, that's where the real magic happens. So what we looked at here is a very, very small part of the overall platform. There's a lot more we can go into, but hopefully that's given you a small flavor of digital adoption. So with that in mind, I might hand back to Ben. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And appreciate everyone attending to get a thorough overview of not just where we see some of the challenges around regulatory frameworks and obligations we have as an organisation, but also where digital adoption has a role to play. It's not the silver bullet for all things, but a role to play in driving the engagement and adoption of these new processes as those regulations translate to the systems and platforms we use every day. Veronica, I might pass over to you if that's okay, just to take us through any next steps.
Wonderful, thank you. So we'd love to now open the floor for any questions. You can either just come off mute and show us your lovely face, or you can pop it in the chat, anything that we've covered so far today.
Yeah, I'm curious about I love what I'm seeing, and I love workforce management, so it's great. I'm curious from a change perspective and adoption in terms of the reporting you can do behind this. So I don't know if there's anything to share there or say, but from a change perspective, I'm curious to see who's pushing that wrong button. Can we support more? Do we need to potentially engage certain teams as opposed to every team?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where my mind is. I don't know if we're covering that today, but
yeah, but perhaps I can give you a perspective on that. So one of the great things, and you quite rightly pointed out, behind everything that you've seen today is a really powerful analytics platform. So subsequent to this, would be more than happy to go and sort of show you in a deep dive on that. But ideally, what you can do is understand the as-is state, use analytics to do tweaks to processes, use analytics to adjust the content you show to just a group of people. And from there, elevate everyone's experience. And then you can report on the subsequent case. And so we have clients across the region that have gone and had a look and say, why is this branch over here doing so much better than another branch in terms of accuracy, data quality, speed to completion? And so they're able to understand whether it's people misunderstanding, different process, documentation, they can tweak things. In addition to that, you can also use the analytics to drive behavior that you want people to exhibit by saying, these are fantastic people, they do it really well. But then there is always a group of people, typically long tenured employees, that are resistant to change. And so when you ask them, hey, are you using the new system? Is everything right? They go, yes, absolutely. But the outcomes and the processes are not there. So what you can do is you can, surreptitiously add content that nudges them in the right direction to say, hey, have you thought about doing X, Y, Z, and we'll make your life easier. So the intent is, by doing the right thing, it's the easiest thing to do. And so people naturally gravitate to that. And that's how you can really start driving change. And then you've got the analytics behind it to go back to your executives to say, we had a business case and this is how we've executed on it.
Thank you, David. Thanks, Andrew. Anyone else? You're taking it all in. I know it's a lot to learn about today. What I'd love to do is for you to share back on your QR codes on your phones. What has been your biggest takeaway from today? Certainly, I think in learning, it's changing from learning how to use the system to learning how to complete the task. Yeah. I think the analytics tool is probably my favorite part, to be really honest, because you really do get to see behind the scenes and get to dig deep. And it's amazing the patterns that you see, and that tells stories. And they're the things you can use with your stakeholders to talk about why we need this, because we have data now to show why we need this. And I think for us in change and learning, driving these digital transformation changes, is these are great conversations to be able to have to drive that adoption, both before go live, but more importantly, post go live too, right? To us, we see that as the most valuable part of WalkMe is how do we ensure the ongoing compliance, the ongoing capability development using something that needs to be adaptable, and that's what WalkMe does. Wonderful. So in the chat, I have put a little link for you to think with us. We would love to learn more about your particular organisation and what challenges you are facing and how jointly Digital Learning Partners and WalkMe can help solve those problems. On behalf of Digital Learning Partners and WalkMe, thank you so much for being part of our webinar series. We are so excited you came along and we look forward to having more in the future. But thank you so much for now and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.